Many people use the term ego lifting, but few actually understand what it really means. So in this video, I want to explain the real definition of ego lifting. I'm going to break down every single facet of it and basically explain what you should be doing and what you should not be doing. So let's break this down. First of all, the most common expression of ego lifting comes with bad form. Bad form is by far the most common thing that guys do. And this can come in many different forms, such as flaring out your elbows like crazy on a bench press, or not retracting your scapula on a bench press, or doing half reps on a bench press. All these things are terrible, which is going to cause you to get injured in the long run. And of course, it's not really representing what your true strength actually is. So if you're doing 315 on the bench press and you're flaring your elbows all the way out to here, you're doing half reps and you're raising your ass off the bench every single repetition, then that is a clear demonstration of ego lifting. You are incapable of lifting that weight with proper form, and therefore you're going to get injured in the long term. And of course, you're not truly representing what your strength actually is. Another example will be the barbell back squat. If you're doing quarter squats and you're claiming that your lift was legit, obviously it is not legit. Or if you go on a powerlifting meet and your squat is above parallel and you get red lighted, well, you can't be claiming that it's a legit lift. So ego lifting, the most common representation of it is when you're using bad form and you're claiming that it's legit. You're claiming that it's strict, when clearly it is absolutely not legit. All right. So it is very important that you use correct form on exercises that were meant to be done with strict form, because otherwise you're not developing strength the proper way. You're not going to get the biggest muscles possible, and you're going to get hurt in the long run. So you're hit with three different things that is non-productive to your training, right? Now, keep in mind, when I say improper form, I'm referring to exercises that were meant to be done strict. There are a few exceptions that you can actually cheat and have perfectly good results, such as the barbell shrug and the cheat row. In a cheat row, it is perfectly fine to raise your torso a little bit and move the bar explosively. Same thing for barbell shrug. There's no issue with bending your elbows a little bit and using the legs to drive the weight up. It's called a low pull in Olympic weightlifting. So I wouldn't call these two lifts ego lifting. When I refer to improper form, I'm talking about exercises that have to be done with strict form, such as the deadlift, the squat, the bench press, pretty much most of the competition lifts, or just classical lifts in general, weighted dips, weighted chin-ups, all kinds of stuff like that. The second form of ego lifting is using improper weights for a given session. Now listen, if you have a volume day and an intensity day every single week, yet you're not following those principles, that is the real definition of ego lifting. Because you're supposed to lift weights that make sense. That makes sense with periodization. That makes sense with your training programming. So if you're going in on an intensity day where you're supposed to do a 1 rep max and you're over here doing 10 sets of 10, you're doing extremely high volume, you're pumping like crazy, that's ego lifting, because that's an intensity day. It's a day that is reserved for lower repetitions. Low repetitions, high percentages relative to 1 rep max. And likewise, if you're going on a volume day and you're supposed to use 65, 75% of your 1 rep max, but you're hitting 85, 90%. You're doing triples. Now you're doing a 1 rep max on a volume day. That is ego lifting. You're not following the principles of the training program. You don't believe in the program. You're going against it. And the result is that you're going to overreach extremely fast and your strength is going to regress. And then you're going to start blaming the system. No, it's called you didn't use the proper weights. So let's just keep it simple. If your workout is designed to lift heavy, go in and lift heavy. Likewise, if your workout is designed to do volume work, then you must pick weights that allow you to hit volume. So if you're going to do 4 sets of 25, don't be failing at the 15th rep. That indicates that you're lifting far too heavy and you're ego lifting. So you need to lift weights that is appropriate to the workout session, that is appropriate for the program. Same thing if you follow a guy's Excel template. If he says you must use these percentages, but your percentages are too high, that is ego lifting. And too many guys do this. They're going to estimate their 1 rep max, let's say 300 bench, then they'll go then the program says 65%, but they're doing 75% because they want to look cool. Listen, lift the weight that is designed for the session, bottom line. The third facet of ego lifting would be trying to lift weights that you're clearly incapable of doing. And an example might be failing a 1 rep max multiple times. So say you try to do a deadlift, right? And the weight does not even budge an inch off the floor, right? And you keep doing it over and over and over again. You keep failing. Next thing you know, you're in the gym for an hour and a half and you're still on the fucking deadlift. I mean, bro, you're ego lifting at that point. You just got to get out and stop. I know there might be some exceptions, such as if you're doing like a Bulgarian type system where you have to max out every day and you really got to zone in. That might be one exception, but in most strength and conditioning programs, if you're constantly failing a weight or you get a weight moving off your chest like an inch and it drops down and you keep trying to hit that weight over and over and over, it's like, dude, drop the weight. So if you're doing 350 on the bench and you keep failing off the chest, drop it down to 335 and get that clean rep in. We can't always get what we want here. We can't always get PRs that make you feel like a god. No, you have to take it one step at a time and lift weights you're actually capable of doing. And the same thing happens with your squat. If you keep going at the bottom and you can't get out of the fucking hole, and now your body tips over into a good morning, you got to use bad form to get the weight up. Listen, you have to drop the weight a little bit. You got to drop that weight and lift weights you're actually capable of doing. And same thing for spotting. If you need a spotter on your bench, actually, here's a good one. If you need a spot for your first rep on a dumbbell press, it means you're ego lifting. It means that you're not strong enough to get the weight off the bottom, because that's what most guys do. They kick the dumbbells up to their shoulders and then they get a spot so that they can move the weight off the chest, and now they're doing half reps. You see, every repetition should look very similar to the first one because that's what builds bottom strength. You have to do dumbbell press with full range of motion. So if you need a spotter to get you off that chest, you're lifting too heavy. If you need a spotter to get you through the lockout of a bench press, you're lifting too heavy. You're incapable of lifting that weight. A spotter is designed to spot for safety. That's it. So if you're doing a bench and you fail the weight's coming down, that's when a spotter lifts it up for you. It's a safety precaution only. It's not an assisting tool. It's not an overloading tool. If you want to overload, use the slingshot, do reverse band, right? It'll do a similar thing in terms of making the weight heavier. So if you constantly need a spotter and you're failing multiple times when you do an exercise and the weight is clearly too heavy for you to do, and you keep doing it, that's ego lifting. That's being a dumbass, and eventually you're going to get hurt. The fourth facet of ego lifting would be trying to train through injuries. This is a big one. This is a really, really big one. So many guys, they have nagging pains in their shoulders, nagging pains in their chest, yet they're still going heavy. They're still periodizing as if they were perfectly fine. Listen, if you have nagging pains or your body's giving you these warning signs, number one, you got to take a deload. And secondly, you got to get your ass over to a doctor. You need to speak to a professional who's going to assess you and figure out what the hell is going on. Because you might have an injury. You might have a rotator cuff problem. You might have some mobility issues. You might have something that if you keep training through this pain, it's only going to get worse. Your injury is going to get so bad that now you're going to be put out of the gym for multiple months, maybe even years. And listen, you never want to be that guy who said, oh, I used to lift weights. You don't want to be that guy who trained through all these injuries. Listen, if you have an injury, you need to assess it. You got to stop going balls to the wall. You have to assess your fucking injury, figure out what it is, and then kill it. Kill that injury, right? Use corrective exercises, do some mobility work, speak to a professional, a physical therapist if you have to. But the point is, don't train through an injury. If you have a lower back problem and you're like, you know what, I'm just going to throw in a belt and that's going to keep me covered. That's wrong, man. You got to first fix the lower back. Then you can go back into regular training. If you have a shoulder problem, you're like, you know what, I'm just going to do a 3 board press. Listen, you got to figure out the root cause of that shoulder issue and stop masking it, okay? And again, some guys, even with the shoulders, they're going to say, oh, you know what, my shoulder hurts at the bottom of a bench press, so I'm just going to do half reps. So it goes back to point number 1. They use bad form and they're lifting too heavy. That's even more going to cause issues. So if you get pain at the bottom of your bench, you probably have an imbalance that needs to be corrected. So listen, never train through injuries. You're only going to regret it in the long term once you get snapped the hell up even more and now you're out of the gym in the long term. And then the final feature of ego lifting is doing exercise that is clearly not built for your anthropometry. And a classic lift that I can think about is the weighted dip. There's a lot of people, about 1 in 3, 1 in 4 guys who cannot do it because of rib cage structure. If they keep doing the weighted dip, they might crack their sternum. I know it happened to a subscriber of mine. His name was the Cosby Criminal. He was really active in the YouTube fitness community, and he kept getting sternum pain on his weighted dips. And I told him, man, you got to stop doing that shit. But he kept doing it, and guess what? He cracked his sternum. He actually cracked his sternum. And I'm sure this has happened all over the world too. Listen, if you get sternum pain on weighted dips, no matter what you do, whether you go body weight, whether you go weighted, whatever, and you've been doing them for a long period of time, and you've tried everything to eliminate that pain, it's not a mobility issue here. It's a structural issue. You are clearly not built to do the lift, and continuing to do so is going to result in injury. Same thing for range of motion. I know Fitness FAQs uploaded a really good video on weighted dip range of motion, so please check that out. If you're going too deep on the dip when it's not built for your anthropometry, you could snap your shoulders up, you could snap your pecs up. So you have to use a range of motion that makes sense on this lift. And you see, I'll even break this down further into deadlifts. A lot of guys, the conventional deadlift has too much hip flexion. It is at the upper extremities of hip flexion, and arm length becomes a very important factor here. So if whenever you do deadlifts, your body is completely bent forward and you have to compensate by rounding the lower back, then it is foolish to continue doing the conventional deadlift. It absolutely makes no sense. Instead, you should switch over to a trap bar deadlift with high handles or a block pull. Bottom line, that's the safest way. Or sumo deadlift to reduce range of motion a little bit and get your body a little bit more upright. But don't try to be Mr. Hardcore, Mr. Oh, I'm so intense because I'm doing conventional, but then you end up with a back injury. That doesn't make sense. Listen, you have to do lifts that are built for your anthropometry. Same thing for machines. A lot of these machines are not built for your anthropometry. You know what I would consider ego lifting? Doing a leg curl when you get knee pain. I know for myself, because I'm a shorter guy, the leg curl machine is not adjusted for my height. So when I do it, I get all kinds of knee pain. That's ego lifting. If I keep doing the leg curl machine, that's ego lifting. The safer way is to take bands, do band leg curls. Safer way is to do Romanian deadlifts, glute ham raises, stuff that my body agrees with, okay? So that is a huge, huge, huge facet of ego lifting. You must do lifts that is built for your anthropometry. Not doing so is going to lead to an injury in the long term. And listen, stop trying to be Mr. Hardcore when it comes down to shit like this. You have to admit that there's some lifts that you can't do. There's some lifts that is not in agreement with your build. And if you keep doing it, you're going to pay the consequences. You're going to suffer greatly in the form of a shoulder injury, a lower back injury, a pec strain. Something is going to happen if you keep ego lifting and doing lifts that you're not supposed to do. So how about we stop with this macho attitude that you must do this lift and you start going back to lifts that actually agree with your build? How about we do that shit, right? How about we get logical and do lifts that make sense? If the behind the neck press hurts your rotator cuffs and shoulders every time you do it, stop doing the fucking behind the neck press. If whenever you do a conventional deadlift, you got to round your lower back, stop fucking doing it. Do a block pull instead. Why do you have to do the classical lift just because it looks cool? Screw that shit. If you're not getting stronger in a safe fashion, it's worthless. Everything you're doing is worthless because you're going to have an injury in the long term and you're going to be put out of the iron game forever. Well, not forever, but you're going to go through all kinds of stuff that could have been avoided. So how about we stop ego lifting and we get back to the real truth of lifting safely in a strong fashion? That is the ultimate goal of a real serious lifter, to get very strong while remaining injury-free in the process. That is what it's all about. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Give me your feedback down below. And with that said, I will talk to you all next time.